Okay, in the last message, they referenced innate fear as saying that racism, the fear that appears as or seems as racism, is not an innate fear. Um, and so I asked, what is an innate fear? And the response I got was this: one that is arrived at on your own, one that is accepted without influence from others, one that exists without collective influence. What would be an innate fear? A fear that arises simply from the experience of seeming separation, fear that originates from feeling outside of God, the original fear, the only fear before distortion makes it seem as anything else. The innate fear is that of separation from God, which is an illusion, though as a human seems very real. Then I asked about what in my life, the PTSD that I experience, and why can't I eradicate this fear? Because in my mind, I know these things, and if I know what fear is and I can witness the fear that exists, why can't I eradicate those responses from this body? And the response I got was, knowing a fear exists doesn't mean the body won't experience it. You can't imagine why it would be beneficial to experience fear, and the body responds to fear. In love, we say, you don't need to understand. The experience is yours, and attempting to understand won't change it. Attempting to fix it won't change it. It will only feel worse. Acceptance through love, as love, in the face of these fears, is all you are required to do. Absolute love and acceptance for your experience. And then I went on and started doing some other things here, sweeping the floor and things like that. And I was getting a lot more information about the original sin idea and how racism and this idea of original sin are so similar. And I'm going to try to tune into that information right now. They were talking about that at the level of God, the body isn't real. And this is something that is talked about in A Course in Miracles, the body being an illusion, all of this being an illusion. And they were kind of tying these things together, and they were saying, at the level of God, the body isn't real. God would recognize the body as the vessel or vehicle required for you to have the human experience. And then they also were showing me all of my animals here that we have. We now have some chickens and some rabbits and things like that, really getting on board with the homesteading idea. And they were showing me, like, your body is no different than these bodies. They allow the being to have the experience that they've come to have. And at the level of God, that's what God would recognize them as. And in A Course in Miracles, we would tie this in with part of the dream of separation from God, which places you in form, in matter, for an experience that is of form and of matter, you as the human form. Okay, so they were speaking that at the level of God, and I'm going to be jumping in and out here, so I hope you can understand and get this message well. At the level of God, we are the perfect creation, the sons, the daughters, which would be the child of God, without male female sex, the child of God that may choose to be anything it wishes, to have that experience. So at the level of God, the body, the form, it's not that it's not real, it's that it's not real in the sense of its importance, okay? To say it's not real makes us sometimes feel unpleasant things around what the body is and these kinds of things. And it's not that it isn't real, it is real as it is needed for the experience. But at the level of God, it isn't real in the sense it's not permanent. So, for example, in a course in Miracles, when they say about it not being real, the body isn't real, this life isn't real, the things that we see aren't real. What they mean by real is it is not permanent. Energy has taken on form. The energy that has taken on that form may choose again and be any other form, or that energy can translate into anything it wishes, which is like you and me. We are the children of God. We are the only begotten Son in that sense, and we can choose to be as anything. What we truly are, our being, is always that divine spark of God, that divine offspring, in a sense, that divine energy. We can choose to be as, in other words, to play the role, to be as, to have the experience of any form, any matter. So when they say it's not real, going back to this message I received today about racism, they were talking about at the level of God, the body isn't real, meaning the body isn't permanent. So now this also ties into Christian beliefs about homosexuality, right? And I have spoken to this on other videos, but the sex of the human form is unimportant. It is only important to the one having the experience. So the one that believes themselves to be that form, that body, given that name, whatever it is, the sex of that body is really only important to them, and it should only be important to them and those that are close to them, having the experiences they're having. At the level of God, there is no male, female. It is one. It is perfected aspects of what we think of as a feminine energy and a masculine energy coexisting in absolute harmony. And so, when a person comes into form, if they prefer how they relate in this world, the sex organs of their body, really, it's only part of their experience. So I'm speaking to this because of the idea we're talking about now of original sin and, how these things translate. Well, it is not a sin to be what we call homosexuality is not a sin. It is a divine being as a man who is attracted to another man in a sexual way. It's that experience. So that's not a sin, and I have spoken about sin before, and sin isn't real. And it is not real. That is another face of fear that has been taught to us in such a way. We have been taught to fear these things. We have been taught to fear that which is considered different. So anyway, back to this. At the level of God, there is no body. At the level of God, we have not yet taken on form. At the level of God, we are pure energy. Let's go there. That makes more sense, doesn't it? At the level of God, we are pure energy, which means we have no physicality. What that means is you have not yet chosen a sex for your form, male or female. You haven't chosen a body, so there is no color of skin. You have not even chosen a body at this point, right? At the level of God. And so racism when I have spoken in other videos that racism does not exist. It does not exist outside of human prejudice. It exists only as fear in the human form. Because outside of the human form, these things do not exist because there is no form. When you are the pure divine energy of your absolute being, form is not a part of that until you choose it. And so racism isn't real at the level of God, for sure, okay? Because at the level of God, none of us have a form. And they were saying about, the original sin. We've been taught to believe that we fell from grace and there's the original sin. And they were speaking of the innate fear. Now, this is a different take on the word innate to me, because innate I had always thought of as referring to that which existed before form or beyond form, the where we are before form comes into play. And here they're using it very differently when they're saying about the innate fear is like the original sin is the innate fear. Okay, I'm mixing this up a little bit, but let me try to explain it better. What has been called original sin in a religious context is a misnomer or a misnaming of the original fear, which they're saying innate fear, which comes from and is only the sense of being separate from God, which is an illusion, which is why they say in A Course in Miracles that this is an illusory experience. This is an illusion, because it all comes from, it is only possible by a sense or believing of being separate from God. Form can exist without our acceptance, our taking on of this belief of separation to a point. We must believe we are separate from God in order to take on form. Why? Because we're kind of dumbing down in a sense from what we are at our fullness, which is pure energy, to call to us particles of form, to create and manifest that into the level of form. At the level of pure energy, form doesn't exist yet. And so, original sin is just a misnomer for our taking on a form. So, and it's not even, some would say, they're giving me words that I'm like, yes, but that could be misleading. And I'm sorry, but anytime I try to put into words the truth, something is lost immediately, because we don't have the words in any language for the truth of what is. It is not something that can be spoken in words. It is not something that can be articulated. Thank you. That was a good one. It's not something that can be articulated. So, and that's something else that, and perhaps it's time for us to focus on this now. We have within our cultures, within our countries, within our sects, acceptable prejudices, things that we don't even recognize as prejudices. those who believe themselves to be of a certain religion, and I'm sorry, Christians, I'm picking on you, who believe that homosexuality is a sin, or it is a sin to, or some believe it is a sin to have tattoos on the skin, or it is a sin to, whatever. All of these things. That is no different than racism. That is no different than sexism or any other ism. Sorry, one second. Okay, so just to wrap it up, the original, what was classified as original sin, what's called original sin, is another way of stating what is being explained to me as a more truthful statement, which is original fear. From the original fear, every other fear came. So it's like, as a human, being a human, we take on fear. It is part of the experience and form. Because, well, it's kind of elementary, right? The body is not permanent, so the body dies and things die, and there is the seeming ability of destruction here, what our eyes see, what our ears hear. At the level of God, where we are pure energy, we know not destruction, we know not death, because energy is always energy. It can take on many different forms, but the form is lost when it chooses to become something else or to go on to something else, right? So there is a sense of finality in that. So having said that, I think I'm not even sure why I needed to touch on that anymore. If I think of anything else, if anything else comes in that seems important, and we'll state it, but the experience of being as human is one of fear, though fear does not have to be as all-encompassing as it has become. There are ways of having the human experience with a greater limitation of fear. There will always be fear, but more subtle degrees are possible, because taking on form, even in our animal friends, fear is a natural response of having a form that is not permanent, that can cease to exist, in a sense. So it isn't really possible to eradicate all fear while in human form, because form itself makes possible fear. And peace and in love, may you be blessed.